Thank you. My name is Megan. I'm an alcoholic. Grateful to be here, and thank you, Lisa, for your share. It is an honor and a privilege to be able to participate in my recovery and see all of your beautiful faces out here participating in yours on a Saturday night, because that is not what I used to do on any given Saturday night in my drinking career. My story starts just outside of Portland in Happy Valley, Oregon. I was born to two kind, caring, and loving parents that were married almost 48 years before my mom passed. Thank you. And, it wasn't a chaotic home. It wasn't an alcoholic home. My brother and I had everything that we needed and a little bit of stuff we wanted. And I had consistency. My dad still lives in the same house I was born in, which, so as my story unfolds, it's not my upbringing that made me an alcoholic. I wasn't an athletic child. I participated in, I'll call them activities. I was a bowler, which I would later realize was a phenomenal drinking activity. I was a musician. I played in the orchestra and all of that. I did tap and jazz, and I say all of those things because I participated in a lot of activities with a lot of people, but I still never felt like I fit in. I wanted to be part of that cool bowling crew. What made them cool? I don't know. But I thought they were more cool than the people that I was with. And what I found out later in my first set of step work is that I created these perceptions of what was cool. They weren't any different than anybody else, but everywhere I go, there I am, and everywhere I am, there's the problem. And so I manifested these perceptions of what was cool, and thereby, alienating myself and feeling not a part of. And I still struggle with that, like today. And, and I was a good student. I didn't get in trouble. I didn't have my first drink until I was 16. And it was, at best, a half of a beer, and it was awful. I am not the alcoholic variety that at that time, put a drink in my body and was like, oh my God, here I am. It was, oh my God, that is disgusting. And, and then I went to college. I went to a small liberal arts college in Salem, Oregon, and I had, college credits already. I was a straight A student. And then I drank in college, and what I felt like at the time was that I drank like a college kid. What I now can recognize is I drank to fit in, I drank to belong, I drank to be a part of. And I didn't chase it per se, but I wanted to be where everybody else was going to be, where all the cool people were. And I graduated early, and I started working when I was 21. And again, all of those things I say because I felt like I had the job, I had the college degree, I didn't get in trouble, like I'm good. And then outside issues came into my life when I was 23, and then I arrived. Those were fun at the time until they became not fun. And, and then I got my first DUI in 2005, and for me, this is where I say a God of my understanding that I have today was working in my life that I had no idea was actually in my life. I wasn't raised in a religious home. In fact, when I would go to church and I came home and used the word God, my mom's like, you're never going back. And so I was driving along after bowling. It was February 13th, 2005, and I was fishing around in my bag for a cigarette that I said I would never smoke, a little outside issues and a lot of wine, and I look up and I find myself driving headfirst into oncoming traffic, and I swerve over, and my spot was still there. And this is where I say that, God was working in my life. I'm like, whew, close call. And then I see the blues, and I get pulled over, and I'm like, what's your problem? And the cop is like holding his heart like, you are my problem, lady. And so, off we go. And I failed the sobriety test, and I didn't pay a lot of consequences for that DUI, so I didn't, I realized there wasn't a grand poobah of AA, so I didn't go. I had people sign my slip and skirted the whole process to the best of my ability, and along I went. But those outside issues were becoming a problem, and somehow my job was in jeopardy. I somehow managed to get a better job, 3,000 miles across the country in Boston. So I did a geographic because my drug dealer was the problem. If I could just get away from him, I'd be fine. So again, everywhere I go, there I am, and everywhere I am, I'm the problem. So I moved 3,000 miles across the country to Boston, sold my house, packed up my cats, and started over. And the outside issues stayed here, but then my alcoholism started to progress. And then I came home in 2010 for a visit, and I got my second DUI. I was having a liquid lunch with some coworkers in south of Salem, and I was driving home on I-5. Well, I was driving up to my best friend in Salem's house, and it was a beautiful sunny day. I'm in my mom's red Mustang convertible, and I'm like, oh my God, it's such a beautiful day, and I get pulled over because someone had the audacity to call me in. And then that one was, they left the jail door open. They let me take a nap. Like 4 hours later, my best friend picks me up, and she's like, do you want to go get a drink? And I'm like, F yes, I do. And, and that's the insanity of the disease, right? Like, here's my second DUI. I have no idea, like, the consequences of that. And I'm like, let's go drink some more. I did not need more. And that was, that's how my drinking was. And I paid consequences for that one. It took a while for somehow I still had an Oregon license, even though I gave it up when I moved out east. And so they suspended that one. It took 1.5 years for it to catch up to me in Massachusetts. I lost my license. I still drank and drove. I still did all the things. I felt like I was immune to what was happening, and I was in complete denial. And then to get that license back, this is again the insanity of my disease, I had to reinstate Oregon by getting an SR22, which is a high-risk insurance policy. Massachusetts didn't offer those. So I moved to Rhode Island to get an SR22, to reinstate Oregon, to reinstate Massachusetts, and then get a Rhode Island valid driver's license. And I thought that was normal. And I just went along my way, right? I'm like, woohoo, I can drive again, legally. And, that was January of 2013. And around this time, a few months later, the Boston bombings happened. And I talk about my running because it is a very, very big part of my story. The Boston bombings happened, and I participated in a relay that 3 people from the UK did, and it ran from California to the Boston Marathon finish line, all across the United States. And it was a fellowship of runners, much like we have here, that banded together for a common cause. And I participated in that relay, and it changed my life. And Facebook and social media were, a thing then, and we were all heavy into communicating that way, and I met a bunch of people that I would have never met outside of doing that relay on social media. And this woman, Trish, who I didn't know in person, I just knew her from social media, and she lived this beautiful life, or so the perception was. And she plays a big part in my story. So this is 2013. I lose my job. It was part of a layoff. Pretty sure my drinking put me on the list of the 2,200 people that got laid off. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to work on myself. I'm going to work on my insides. And all I did was become a 24/7 drunk. I started drinking from the time that I woke up until the time I went to bed. And then after a while, I had to go back to work. And so I somehow found a career job, and I tucked a fifth of vodka in my desk drawer because, again, somehow that was normal to me. I would celebrate if I didn't have to drink at work, by over drinking that night and then having to drink more the next day to like steady myself out. And so then that is progressing. I lose that job. I got fired. And it took a long time for me to acknowledge that I had been fired. And I'd like to think it was just because I didn't do my job well, but like I slept under my desk. I slept in the mother's nursing room because I needed a nap so that I could like return to work. And so this is July of 2015, and at that time I was also in a relationship and lost that relationship. You know, I thought he was the one, he was not the one. You know, and my world like started to spiral out. And also at that time I was training for my first marathon. And I ran the Portland Marathon 1 month and 4 days before I got sober. And I gave my mom and dad a bag to take with them to mile 20, and I put little nips of vodka in there. Also not normal for people that are running a marathon. But for me, I thought that that was a requirement. I did not take any of those, but when I was done with that race, my friend Lisa's like, "Why are you shaking so bad?" I'm like, "I don't know, this happens every time I run." No concept that I was detoxing, no concept that it was the alcohol. It was just like, I don't know, this just happens all the time. It had become part of my normal. I had normalized it. And 3 days later, I went out with some friends, and I came home, and I tripped on the area rug in my parents' living room, and my mom was in her chair, and my dad was at the door to the basement, and the look of shame and disgust on my mother's face bore a hole in my soul. And there were many times that my mom talked to me about my drinking, and I just wrote it off. I was squawking at her, and I told her, "Nope, Mom, I don't have a problem." Now, my mom was raised in an alcoholic home. Her mother was abusive in all of the ways, and what my mom was responding to was that I was being her mother. I didn't know that, I didn't understand it, we didn't talk about it, and it took a long time for my mom to be able to say those things to me. But that moment, you know, changed my life. I didn't get sober that day. It still took about a month. But that woman, Trish, that I mentioned, happened to post on social media, on Facebook, that on October 7th, which is the day that I tripped on that area rug in front of my mother, she was celebrating 9 years of sobriety. Is that God or is that odd? For me, that was a total God shot, and I reached out to that woman, and I said, you know, I think I have a problem with alcohol. I was still not ready to say that I was an alcoholic, but I could say that I had a problem. And I flew back to Boston, and she took me to my first set of meetings. She took me to my second set of meetings, and she was really a guide and a coach for me. And then she had groups of runners and friends and things that they did, and I just stuck myself in her back pocket. And because I wanted what she had, I just didn't know how to get there. So on November 7th, 2015, I went on a blind date with Wayne, poor Wayne, because I said I wasn't going to drink. Like, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. And I did it. Like I wasn't a blackout drinker, but I don't really remember a lot of that night, other than where my last drink was, and that when I came to the next morning, something was different. Something had to change. And there was a meeting at the Kent County Hospital in Warwick, Rhode Island at 10 a.m. on a Sunday morning, and I poured myself into that meeting. Literally, I was like a vodka fest. And I sat in the back of the room and I bawled my eyes out. And some really nice people and women came and scooped me up. They tried to get me into a treatment center. Actually, it was offered free treatment, and I denied it because I wasn't like you people. I was judgy, I was condescending, I was resistant. I wasn't as bad as you people, and I characterize it as you people. Because to me, an alcoholic was a homeless, okay, this is also going to sound really judgy, a homeless man under the Burnside Bridge with a trench coat and a 40 and a brown paper bag. And that wasn't me, right? I was a professional. I wasn't working, but I was a professional. And so therefore I can't be an alcoholic, when indeed I was. And, that day changed my life. That next day, on November 9th, it was 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It's a moment I will never forget. And I'm sitting there, and I'm like dying. I felt like I was dying anyway. And I'm like, I have two choices. I can either go 0.2 miles down to the liquor store and get a bottle and solve my problem with my problem, because I thought booze was the problem. I didn't know that I was. Or I can power through this and know I never have to feel that way again. And for the first time in my life, that was the direction I went. And there started my journey in Alcoholics Anonymous. I started going to an 8 a.m. meeting every day. Actually, my first sponsor said to me, if you drink in the morning, go to a meeting in the morning. If you drink during the day, go to a meeting during the day. And if you drink at night, go to a meeting at night. So I went to a lot of meetings. I drank all day long and all night long. So, the only time I didn't drink was when I passed out. And then I'd always have my glass of room temperature vodka next to my bed. So I didn't have to go far to start it out. But I walked into the rooms and there was laughter. And there was, people were jovial. What is your problem? And then I heard a woman, just in a 2-3 minute share, start to tell my story. And for the first time in my life, I felt not alone. I felt like, oh my God, they know me. How do they know me? And it's not that they knew me, it's that they're very similar. We have may not have all gotten here the same, but we have something inside of us that is. And, I did the steps to the best of my ability at that time. I've actually done the steps a lot of times. And revisiting things that surface and come up. And, in my, adventure in sobriety went from Rhode Island, where I got sober, and then I moved to Massachusetts because when I went back to work, my commute was 61.4 miles each way. And the blessing in that is that it kept me on the straight and narrow, right? I got up really early because if I didn't, traffic was atrocious. I went in, I worked out, I went to a 7 a.m. meeting, I went to work, I went home. And that was like clockwork. Saturday mornings, I went and ran with the crew, I went to a meeting at night. That was like rinse and repeat, but it's exactly what I needed to get embedded in my recovery. And then in 2017, my mom got sick. And, my mom and I we had parts that were rough in our relationship. And then after I got sober and she realized that my life was changing, she started to change too. And in August of 2017, I was able to make an amends to her. And what was a really scary conversation turned into 4 hours of healing. And that is the gift of this program. My mom passed away on July 5th, 2018. And our last words to each other were, I'll love you and I'll miss you. And that is the power of this program, because if I wasn't sober and if I wasn't doing what I was doing, that would have never happened. And I happened to be home for my birthday and Father's Day, which are in the same week, when she fell really ill and we knew that the end was there. So God put me there with a job that allowed me to stay in Portland for as long as I needed to be so I could have that moment. And after she passed, I realized that I had feelings, a lot of them. And I was very angry. I didn't understand what anger was until I lost my mom. And I didn't understand how much empathy she was there for me until I was going to other sources like my dad or my brother, and it wasn't there. And a woman told me, she's like, you have to find the people that can help fill up that well, because you're going to an empty well having expectations to get something and leaving with resentments. Instead, fill up that well with things, with people that you can get what you need and fill up your cup. And so I learned how to do that. And that was not easy because that meant me being raw and being vulnerable. I would rather talk about anything but my feelings at that point in time. It's not the case today. And then fast forward a little bit, COVID came, I was sponsorless. I didn't fire my sponsor, but I kind of stopped talking to her. And I call it doing the independent thing, which I don't recommend at all. But that's where I was at that point in time, and then COVID hit. And I went from working in an office to working from home. And my world got, all of our worlds got really small, and I felt like after a little while of, I was working 15-hour days, what else am I gonna do? And it really took a toll on like my mental well-being. And I was really struggling. So I came back to Portland for a visit in July 2020. And, I'd avoided a lot of relationships in that time, and then I proceeded to get into one with a person in Portland. And I spent a month here and then went back to Boston, and I, started to unravel my life of 14 years on the East Coast to come back to Portland. And it was a journey. It was hard and it was difficult, and there were a lot of moments where my gut told me this probably wasn't a good idea because he was starting to not become a good idea, but I'm also codependent, come to find out, and so I didn't listen to my gut. I had a big can of green paint, and I took all the green paint and painted all the red flags green. And there's a lot of lessons that have been learned. And so I moved back here in July of 21. And it was really hard because the Portland I knew from 2007 and before when I moved was not the same Portland. My mom wasn't in that house. My friendship circle was non-existent. I didn't have a support system. And the AA I did have out there was tied up with the boyfriend, so I created all of my own new AA. And I found a sponsor who, thank God, she just does not co-sign anything of mine. And I needed that, and I became willing to have that in my life. Because for a long time, I wasn't willing. I didn't want to hear it. I was resistant. You don't know, you just don't know. I know best. And my ego would tell me that for a long time. And, I started on my journey with her, and, fast forward to May 10th of 2022, and I had been watching my nephew. He was 6 at the time, and my brother came home from a work trip in Eastern Oregon, and I went upstairs to say goodbye. He was living at my dad's at the time, and my nephew's like running off the bed and jumping in my arms, and we're having this beautiful laughing moment, and I said, I'll see you Saturday. I love you, and I'll see you Saturday, because my nephew had a game that day. And that was the last time I saw my brother alive. And my whole world got ripped out from under me. And I got that phone call 2 hours later from one of the baseball moms that Alex had collapsed at the batting cage and that I needed to go to the hospital. And so I just remember driving over there and screaming at a God of my understanding with tears that it's not his time. And I don't have control over that time. And that changed my whole world. I had to tell my dad that his son passed away and didn't make it. He was 47 and died of a heart attack. And, no day is promised, So a few weeks, so my whole world is like in upheaval. My nephew gets pulled with his alcoholic addict mother, which is like a non-podium story. A few weeks later, I get COVID for the first time, and I'm really sick. And then 7 weeks to the day after my brother died, I was given like buried family secret I'm told of that also just changed my whole world. And then that boyfriend that I had moved back for, his abusiveness, took it, he just, whole new level. And for 362 days, I fell into complete darkness. And I would drive along at a certain point, be like, I wonder, how am I gonna do this, Or I'd be running over a bridge, an overpass, I'm like, oh, that might do it. Thoughts I'd never had in my entire life, and I am sober. and active in Alcoholics Anonymous and in my program, but there was just some stuff that was not connecting for me, and I was so buried in that grief and the chaos and the abuse and all of it that I didn't realize this until, a little time later, that I was living in my disease, and I was the victim, and that's the part I played. And, I had 3 really pivotal conversations with my sponsor, and I share them because they can apply to anything in my life. I was squawking. I was telling Lisa, I'm like, yeah, I was squawking to my sponsor, and I'm like, I can't do this anymore. And she's like, well, of course you can, because you are. I'm like, what? And she's like, you can continue to do whatever you want. It's just, if you don't want to do it anymore, what are you going to do to change it? And immediately taking me out of my victim stance. I didn't like that very much, but it's very true, and I use it all the time today. And then another time I was talking to her, squawking, and she's like, Megan, I think you're addicted to the chaos. I'm like, what? I am not addicted to chaos. And I stewed about that for probably 24 hours until it came to me that I was indeed addicted to the chaos. And then the last conversation she had, it was on May 3rd, 2023. And, I was talking about a situation a friend of mine was in, and she's like, well, Megan, the only difference between you and her is that she's made a decision and you haven't. Well, alrighty then. Because I got to that place again, of step 1, where I stood at the turning point, and the pain of staying in all of that was becoming greater than the pain of figuring out what was on the other side of that. And, I had become powerless over all of these things, and my life was unmanageable in sobriety. I didn't need alcohol to get there. Hi, everywhere I go, there I am. Everywhere I am, I'm the problem. And on May 6, 2023, I was kind of backed into a corner on FaceTime. I was in California on a road trip after a marathon, and, I'm like, that's it. I'm done. And I uttered the next, with Trish, I said, I need help, and those were the first 3 words that were the most important 3 words I've ever said, and these are the second set, is that I choose me. And for the first time in a really long time, I'm like, that's it, I'm done, I'm out. And that particular day, it had been raining. I went and I finished my last hike, and I proceeded to drive back to Portland, and the sun came out, and I felt lighter and freer than I had felt in a really long time. And for me, that's like a second sobriety date for me, because that's the last 14 months have been the most incredible 14 months that, it's where you say my life it's unrecognizable to what it was, and it's like a dream come true. It's not perfect, but it's pretty freaking great. And I got into another set of steps with my sponsor. And this time, I'd done a sister program of Codependence Anonymous, and I weaved that program into this 4th step, and I had to own my stuff. I had to look at myself in a really ugly way and take responsibility in a way that I'd never done it before, and it changed my life. Because I went into that 5th step, the victim, and I walked out of it unvictimized. And that's when I really was like, okay, here we go. And I got busy living. And I started to reclaim friendships that I had let go because of that situation. I got busy in AA, and I just started to build this really beautiful life. I bought a house earlier this year all on my own. I have a good career that is problematic some days. As long as I don't participate in the problem, it's tolerable. I have a partner today who I just adore and I'm so grateful for. And, those are all the exterior things are only because of the work I've done in Alcoholics Anonymous. It's only because I participate in my recovery. Action, right? One, I have to be willing. I have to be open, and I have to be honest, and then I have to put in the action. And when I sit and rest in my laurels, I get out of my recovery what I put into it, just like my running, like whatever I put into it, I get out of it. So the more I pour myself into my recovery, the more that I'm getting out of it and reaping the benefits. And I might only go a half hour. So I'm going to wrap up with a story. About a year ago at this time, I was in Portugal for work. And I decided to extend my trip, and I went up to Porto, Portugal, which is like a wine country. Not why I went. But it's beautiful. It was like absolutely stunning and spectacular. And I go on this hop-on, hop-off bus. I'm a big fan of them. And there are these two seats, one right next to me and one over in the aisle. And the rest of the bus was packed, and these two gentlemen get on, and they sit in each two seats, and we're moseying along in a little small chitter-chatter, and I say something about how I don't drink. I think he asked me, like, oh, are you here for, like, the wine? And I'm like, no, I don't drink. And he's like, are you a friend of Bill's? I'm like, what? And so these two gentlemen that got on that bus that sat in the only two seats that were next to me were 37 and 42 years sober, respectively. And here I am, like, I don't even know, 6,000 miles away from home on a hop-on, hop-off bus on a Monday morning. And, we did that whole tour together and had so much fun that we then met up later for the sunset over the Douro Bridge, it's just unbelievable. And then had a Portuguese dinner that night together, which is like a 3-hour dinner. They don't do things quickly. And, Paul, one of the gentlemen, we were talking, and it was like we'd known each other forever. Just vulnerability and feelings and emotions and just laying it all out there. And, we were talking about our families, and I shared that my brother had passed away, and somehow we talked about dates. And Alex passed away on May 10th, 2022, and Paul's brother passed away on May 10th, 2020. And it still gives me chills today. I still periodically check in with them. But for me, that is like my God doing for me what I could not do for myself. They put those two men in my path on that trip to fill up my cup with Alcoholics Anonymous and the fellowship of this program. And that is a million reasons why today I'm so grateful to be an alcoholic, because I used to be embarrassed to say I was an alcoholic. I wanted no part of you people. And, and today I want all of the parts of you people. You make my life better. You teach me every single day something new. I'm better than I was yesterday, and the things I do today, I only hope, God willing, are going to make me better tomorrow. And, this program has changed my life in such an incredible way, and I am just so, so grateful. So my name is Megan. I'm an alcoholic. Thank you for letting me share.